PG&E's lawyers wrote the law that allowed them to get away with murder. That's absolutely horrifying.
And that is Steve Bradley, the grandson of one of PG&E's 84 manslaughter victims from the 2018 Camp Fire. He's one of many survivors and victims of PG&E fires, outraged at what we found in our 4-year-long Fire Power Money investigation. And the law he's talking about, AB 1054, was advanced by Governor Gavin Newsom. It protected PG&E from all the financial consequences of its crimes. The state passed the law, and then PG&E pleaded guilty to 85 felonies. So tonight, the woman who used to be PG&E's top state regulator tells our Brandon Ritteman the law raises the stakes for customers as PG&E faces manslaughter charges.
PG&E has become a rogue criminal corporation that acts only for itself and always tries to increase its profits and wring every penny it can out of its customers.
Loretta Lynch used to be PG&E's top state regulator, leading the California Public Utilities Commission. She was CPUC president in the early 2000s.
No one is holding PG&E to account. If we don't have real consequences for PG&E's criminal actions, then PG&E will never change, and we, Californians, will always be at risk.
Part of the thing that keeps me up at night after investigating this for 4 years is the question of how big of a thing will they have to burn down in order to actually generate accountability.
You know, that's what I thought after San Bruno.
This gas pipeline ruptured in San Bruno. The explosion and fire killed 8 people. PG&E was convicted of 6 felony charges.
While on federal probation for its San Bruno crimes, PG&E started the Camp Fire, pleading guilty to more crimes.
Well, now surely the PUC and the legislature and the governor will hold PG&E to account. And very sadly, that didn't happen.
The federal judge in charge of PG&E's criminal probation for the gas explosion started to demand answers about power lines. Lynch had left the CPUC before San Bruno, but she says the probation was a golden opportunity for her former agency to get some help, forcing PG&E to change.
I was astonished, however, that the California Public Utilities Commission would come into Judge Alsup's court and argue for lower standards. What the PUC said was, Judge, what you're ordering is just way too hard for little PG&E to have to deal with. Let them do what we've ordered, which is a whole lot less. So the PUC was advocating on PG&E's behalf.
PG&E's probation under federal judge William Alsup expired in early 2022, even though the company went on a crime spree, in his words. He said PG&E will emerge from probation as a continuing menace to California. PG&E didn't comment when we asked them to respond to that.
And the judge called them a rogue corporation, because that's what they are. Because the PUC is not doing its job, and Sacramento isn't making it do its job.
So PG&E has a problem, it's criminal, and the state is playing enabler.
Absolutely. The state of California moved mountains and weakened the law in order to protect the ability of PG&E to make a profit as a for-profit corporation.
The CPUC didn't respond to our request for comment. Lynch was disappointed to see local DAs settle the Dixie and Kincaid fires this past year without criminal charges. But Shasta County is still moving ahead with 4 new charges of manslaughter in the 2020 Zog fire.
No one should have to go through that. No one.
Zach McLeod's wife and their 8-year-old daughter are among the 4 people killed. PG&E pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of manslaughter and other charges. The preliminary hearing is set for January 2023. Lynch says the outcome matters beyond justice for the victims because of AB 1054, Governor Newsom's safety certificate law.
Now, if they cause a wildfire, the customers pay for the damages and not the utilities. So it's this golden ticket. Whatever they do, unless essentially they're criminally negligent, is going to be paid for by their customers.
Because PG&E wasn't held criminally liable for the 1,000 or so homes destroyed in the Dixie fire, those civil damages could cost customers. Meantime, PG&E fell under yet another criminal investigation in the past year, the Mosquito Fire. Arson investigators from the U.S. Forest Service seized parts of this PG&E transmission line where the fire started. If it was caused by PG&E, it would be the 6th year in a row the company started a large fire that destroyed homes.
You already know, Brandon's back with us. And I think the first question I want to ask you is, if I am a PG&E customer, when I look at my bill, am I already paying for this?
Yeah, you are. So AB 1054 created a pot of money, an insurance fund run by the state, and customers pay for half of that $21 billion of state insurance. It was turned into bonds and then charged a little bit at a time each month. If you look on your bill, you'll see a wildfire fund charge. That's the front end of all this, okay?
So people could already see that on their bill right now.
Yeah, we're sort of pre-funding fire damage through
Okay.
that. That's available. That fund is available to PG&E and the other two big for-profit utilities in California. And so on the back end, the question becomes, who's responsible for paying that fund back if it had to pay out wildfire damages? And that is where AB 1054 presumes that PG&E acted reasonably. It's one of the reasons that you just heard Loretta Lynch say it matters whether they're convicted of a crime, because if you're convicted of a crime, it's pretty hard to argue that what you did was reasonable.
Yeah.
Still technically possible, but we don't need to get into all that. The point is, there's a whole process on the back end that, believe it or not, is decided by the California Earthquake Authority. Not making that up. They deal with big insurance, so they got this job. And that's going to determine whether PG&E's customers have to pay back into the fund or whether the shareholders will have to take it out of their profits.
And the last thing you mentioned in the piece was the mosquito fire. What do we know right now with the investigation? Anything?
It's a federal case. We think of the Forest Service as Smokey Bear, but they also are cops. So they do arson investigations. And as part of the one on the mosquito fire, they actually seized an entire pole, a big steel pole, took out of the ground as evidence in part of their arson investigation, along with other pieces of equipment from that 60,000 volt PG&E line that runs there. And one of the reasons it's particularly troubling is this wasn't a particularly old pole. PG&E says it was about a decade old and subject to all their new ways of doing things. So it raises the question of whether their new way of doing things is actually, better.